If you clicked on this video, there was probably something about the Summer Hikaru Died that stuck with you. Maybe it was the closet parallels, the portrayal of grief, or let's be honest, maybe you just wanted to see the Chussie scene again. But even with explicitly queer themes, the series still resonated far beyond its core audience. So it got me thinking, there must be something more universal, something fundamental to the human experience to pull in so many people this strongly. To explore that, let's look at the Summer Hikaru Died a little differently. Not just as a story about two boys, but as a story about you. Have you heard of the shadow? It's a term from the psychiatrist Carl Jung. He defined the shadow as the sum of everything you repress. Your instincts, your forbidden desires, your shame. Sounds like something our boy Yoshiki knows a little too well, doesn't it? I mean, honestly though, who could blame him for repressing? In a suffocating village, everyone's always watching. Horror incarnate over here yaps non-stop about his hair, his sister, and even his parents' fight last night. People whisper gossip during a time of celebration, and when a man's outed for being gay, they call him diseased. So of course Yoshiki learns to hide his heart, his thoughts, his feelings for Hikaru. Even when he loses the one person that made it all worth it, all he could do was weep silently. But there's only so much you can bury before it becomes distorted. Yoon once said that what you refuse to face within will act out in distorted form, shaping your life from the shadows. And in Yoshiki's case, that distortion takes the shape of a boy who came back wrong. Hikaru isn't just some random monster. He's the distorted manifestation of Yoshiki's repressed love. Through this monster, Yoshiki is forced to face everything he buried. His guilt, his love, his fear, all of it, now staring back at him with Hikaru's face. In this way, Yoshiki and Hikaru are two halves of the same whole. The part of you that is presented to the world, and everything else you can't bear to show. And for Yoshiki or anyone else to become whole again, he has to do something terrifying. He has to stop running, to face his monster, understand him, and most painfully of all, learn to love him. It's already an unconventional love story between a boy and a monster, but maybe it's also a love story between you and the parts of yourself you've been taught to hate. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's great, but why supernatural horror? Why does a story about self-acceptance need to also scare the crap out of me? Well, let's think about it. The supernatural takes that quiet, gnawing feeling of, I should be ashamed of this, and turns it into something real. Something with a face you can physically touch. And we can't talk about physical without mentioning that scene. For Yoshiki, it's uncomfortable. He's been taught his whole life to fear the part of himself that Hikaru represents. But it's also fascinating, because it's a warped reflection of the very thing he's been starving for. Connection, affection, love, the kind he was never allowed to reach for. It's like touching the deepest part of yourself for the first time, the part that never fit the world's definition of normal. This scene is a mirror, showing what it feels like to finally make contact with a thing you spent your whole life avoiding. And this isn't the only time horror works this way. Think back to the first episode. Those jarring, rapid cuts between Yoshiki's struggle with the new Hikaru and Miss Matsura's desperate attempts to keep the monster out. The editing draws a clear parallel. The way Miss Matsura futilely bars the door mirrors the way Yoshiki has spent years trying to shut out the feelings that now wear Hikaru's face. You can try to shut the door, you can even beg it to stay away, but...
もう入ってますよ.
That's the beauty of horror in this anime. It makes the invisible visible, showing in the most literal way possible the complicated and terrifying process of facing yourself. So, what does that process actually look like? We can see it unfold through Yoshiki's relationship with Monster Hikaru, a journey that moves through denial, fear, understanding, rejection, acceptance, relapse, and finally unity. It all begins the moment they meet. Yoshiki staring into something he can't accept isn't actually his best friend. And that's how it usually begins in real life too. We sense something dark or uncomfortable within us and deny it. I'm not like that. I can never feel that. It's how we protect ourselves. Then, 6 months later, Yoshiki finally confronts his monster and is met with a threat. Don't tell anyone or I'll have to kill you. That's exactly how the repressed parts of us behave. They hold us hostage through fear. The moment you start facing what you've buried, that voice whispers, if people knew this about you, they'd never love you again. So what other option is there but to hide? Your survival depends on it. Meanwhile, Hikaru begins killing the people who might expose the truth. That is projection in its purest form. The closeted man attacking others for being gay, the priest condemning sin because they see it reflected in themselves. That's what happens when what you hide starts acting on its own, just like Hikaru killing Miss Matsura while Yoshiki is none the wiser. And afterwards, Yoshiki drowns in a torrent of grief, fear, and guilt. But something changes along the way. He begins to understand his monster. That's the next step. Coexistence giving way to the faintest glimmer of compassion. It's not acceptance just yet, but it's the moment you stop saying, that's not me, and start daring to think, maybe it is, and maybe I can do something about it. But at this point, Yoshiki still doesn't know his monster has killed. It's a naive understanding, so when he catches Hikaru in the act, his fear returns stronger than ever. It's that moment of self-awareness when you finally realize the broken parts of you have been hurting the people closest to you, and you're terrified. That knowledge is too much to handle, and by the following day, that awareness curdles into rejection, culminating in an attempt to kill his monster. And it's not just him. It's no different from praying away your desires or numbing the thoughts with substances. All the ways we try to kill the part of ourselves we aren't ready to accept. But in the end, Yoshiki resigns himself to the truth. His monster can't be killed. And yet, in that failure, something changes. Instead of dying, Hikaru offers Yoshiki a half of himself, a gesture of connection. Because for the first time, Yoshiki had accepted him for what he was. This was the moment Hikaru realized what he'd been missing all along, the feeling of belonging. And doesn't it make so much sense? If Hikaru is the embodiment of repressed love, then of course what he longs for most is to be accepted. And Yoshiki's first act of acceptance, although fragile and imperfect, is what moves the monster to give a part of itself. It's the start of a real connection, born not from destroying the monster, but from accepting a part of it as yourself, and learning to bear the weight of what that means. Acceptance comes with a price. The more Yoshiki embraces his monster, the more he mixes, and the more he mixes, the more impurities he attracts. Because once you stop pretending and start showing your whole self, people judge. Maybe you felt it too, when honesty makes the world just a little colder. That's what the impurities represent, the world's resistance to your authenticity. But it's not just Yoshiki changing, Hikaru is changing also. Trying to understand humans, to understand what it means to live. Mixing is a two-way street. The parts of you that once scared you, that you were taught to hide, begin to express themselves a bit less destructively once you start to see and accept them. Still, it's a balance. Mix too little and you stay hollow behind the mask. Mix too much, and you lose yourself entirely. So pressure closes in from both sides towards Yoshiki, the hostile outer world in the form of impurities, and the dangerous inner world in the form of Hikaru. And at this point, it all seems like it could be solved really easily if Hikaru just disappears. And it's tempting. It's that moment when your own mind begs for relief. Can we not do this anymore? Can we go back to being normal? That's why Hikaru offers to go back to the mountain. Because the part of you that has finally surfaced now sees how terrifying it feels to exist in the open and how much pain it causes just by being there. But there's something even scarier, realizing that if you turn away now, you might lose a part of yourself forever. Yoshiki finally understands that. He's already spent his whole life denying who he is, and now that it's standing right in front of him, he can't bear to let it go. So this time, he makes a choice. One that defies everything he's been taught. In Japan, it's customary to remove your shoes before death, a final gesture of politeness, of not bringing something unclean into the afterlife. And during the lead up to the finale, that image keeps quietly appearing. Hikaru dirties his shoes. He leaves them behind when he runs into the water. He's even framed by them as he plays in the ocean. Then, after Hikaru finally admits he'll go back to the mountain, there's one last cut to his shoes, a silent confirmation of the choice he's made, the symbolic suicide he's been preparing himself for. But after a lifetime of repression, of wearing a mask just to survive, Yoshiki steps into the ocean and finally says what he truly means.
光が人殺しやとしても前と光と一緒に
It's a declaration of unity. He's seen what Hikaru is. He's even been offered freedom from him. And yet, Yoshiki steps into the water, shoes on, still choosing to be with his monster. This choice is an act of rebellion against the world that taught him to be ashamed. Yoshiki isn't just speaking to Hikaru, he's speaking to himself. I see you, I understand you, I love you. And in doing so, he becomes whole. For Yoshiki, the part of himself he was never allowed to embrace was love. For someone else, it might be anger, or grief, or resentment. But understanding, guiding, and loving that part of yourself, that's how you transform it into strength. It's not about killing the monster or sending it back to the mountain. It's about giving it a home and accepting you won't come out unchanged. To unite with what you fear is to finally belong to yourself. Just like Yoshiki and Hikaru, two halves of one heart, who have, at last, found home in each other. Because sometimes, becoming whole isn't about finding delight. It's about finding the courage to live with your shadow.